Welcome to this week's Alertus Power Lunch, hardware installation best practices for alert beacons and IP text-to-speech speakers. So this session will provide a comprehensive device overview, offering suggestions for optimal mounting locations and reliable power sources. We'll also cover best practices for post-installation tasks and thorough device testing, ensuring your Alertus hardware is set up for success. So as you can see, there are some other people on this call besides the familiar faces of me and Sarah. So I just wanted to introduce Nick Hart and Anthony Lucchese coming from our implementations team to assist during this conversation. So this is an interactive session, of course, so please feel free to put any questions in the chat, in the Q&A feature, and also be aware that this session is being recorded for training purposes. All right, without further introduction, I'll throw it over to Sarah to get us started.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brooke. I will go ahead and share my screen. And I do have just a couple of slides to go through today for each product to give sort of a product overview. And then we'll also demonstrate activating the text-to-speech speaker and the alert beacons behind me from the Alertus console. But for the agenda today, we'll start by talking about the alert beacon to go over a product overview, some general guidelines for mounting, connecting power, some dip switch settings, and then, like I mentioned, we'll demo how to activate and manage alert beacon settings from the Alertus console. And then for the IP text-to-speech speakers, again, we'll start with an overview, some mounting guidelines for connecting power and network, and then we'll go over some best practices for testing and managing activations from the console. And then finally, we'll wrap up by sharing some resources in the chat. There are installation guides for both the alert beacons and the text-to-speech speakers that have pretty much all of the information that we'll go over today, so that'll definitely be a good resource for those devices. But to get started with introducing the alert beacon, you can see I have two alert beacons behind me, and you can see one on the picture here. But alert beacons are audible visual notification devices that attract attention with sounders, flashing strobes, and there is a large text display that will contain the alert message to inform anyone within the building about the alert that's going on. And the alert beacons do communicate via port 80, and there will be instructions shipped with the product, but it is to be installed by a trained electrician who is familiar with the codes, just to make sure that everything is done correctly and safely. And for the alert beacons, the units or devices are typically wall mounted in high visibility areas. So something like a lobby, front office, or really any prominent space where there are going to be a lot of people moving by, just so that it is able to effectively, again, notify anyone within the building. And we do recommend a suggested mounting height of about 48 inches above the floor in accordance with accessibility recommendations, just to make sure the message is accessible to be read by as many people as possible. And I do have a recommendation. We're going to go over some ways to test the device to make sure it is connected and activating properly, but we do typically recommend bench testing the devices before you install them in the final location, just to make sure you can save yourself some work if there are any issues or troubleshooting needed. You can get that done before you do finally install it in the permanent location. And for alert beacons, they can operate on DC power from 13.4 volts to 24 volts, and they require a maximum of approximately 15 watts. And the required barrel plug dimensions are 2.5 millimeters inner diameter and 5.5 millimeters for the outer diameter. But if you are using DC power, you'll simply connect the barrel plug into the appropriate jack on the alert beacon, which you can see on the image here. And then this information again is in the alert beacon installation guide that we'll share if you do want to review it. And if you are using AC power with your alert beacons, the AC power connections are made through the alert beacon's auxiliary port using a Phoenix connector. So you'll attach one end of a two-conductor cable to the AC power source and then strip the wires carrying the low voltage AC power and insert them into the terminal block plug, which you can see on the image here. And then you'll insert that plug into the terminal block on the back of the alert beacon, and that will connect the AC power. And then if you are connecting power over Ethernet, the only required connection is the data/power cable from the PoE data equipment. And you'll use a category 5E or category 6 cabling with a standard RJ45 connector. And additionally, on the back of the alert beacons, there are a few dip switches, which you can see circled here. And the position of those dip switches are going to determine some of the settings that will be used by the alert beacons. So the first dip switch is reserved for future use. So right now we recommend just having it set to off. It's not currently being used. But the middle dip switch, or dip switch 2, can determine if the siren is able to be muted by pressing the acknowledge buttons or the two black buttons on the front of the alert beacon. So if you did have dip switch 2 set to on, then during an alert when the siren is going off, if someone comes up and presses those two acknowledge buttons, that would mute or turn off the siren for that device. So we generally do not recommend setting that to on if the alert beacon is going to be installed in a public area, since you probably don't want people to be able to come up and mute the siren by pressing those buttons. But if you do install an alert beacon in an administrative office, like a police dispatch center, that continued siren operation might interfere with their emergency response. So if it's in like a dispatch office, you could allow them to mute the siren once they're aware of the activation so they can continue to focus on their response procedures without hearing that siren. And there is a third dip switch on the back of the alert beacon. And if that is set to on, the alert beacon will never make a sound regardless of the alert settings that you set from the server. So that could be an option if you did ever have a reason that you needed a particular alert beacon to never make any sound. And then we do also have some recommendations for post-install tasks for your alert beacons. In order to properly configure the devices in the Alertus system, administrators will need to have a record of the unit ID and the location of the alert beacon. The unit ID is printed on the back of the device, and Alertus does provide alert beacon install logs for this purpose so that as you are installing the alert beacons, you can make sure you have the ID number and the location written down just to keep track of all of your devices and make sure they are identified correctly in the system. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and log into the Alertus console to demonstrate some alert beacon settings. And I'm going to start by just showing how you can add a new alert beacon into the system. So if you did need to add a new alert beacon or update existing alert beacon settings, you will do that from this Configure System section in the Alert Devices page. And here you'll see all of your devices listed, and I could filter by devices at the top if I just want to look at my alert beacons. And what we're going to do is add this yellow alert beacon back into the system. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete it here, and then we'll walk through the steps to add it back together. So if you are going to add a new alert beacon, you would just click Add Alert Beacon on this page. And I will also mention, since that alert beacon was deleted from the system, if I do now go into my device status report, which I'll open in another tab, I can also see that this alert beacon is connected to power, but it's not configured on my system. So I see it showing up as not configured here. And I could click that not configured link in the device status page, and that will also bring me to this page that I got to by clicking Add Alert Beacon. This one just already has the ID number filled in. But as you're adding a new alert beacon, you'll start by just giving the device a name. I'm going to call this one Yellow Alert Beacon Training Wall. I definitely, like I mentioned, recommend giving it a name that sort of indicates where the alert beacon is, just to make it easier to keep track of it. And then this is where you'll put in the ID number for the alert beacon if it's not entered in correctly, and that'll be the ID that's printed on the back of the device. And then there is also a description option here. If you did want to include any additional installation or device information, you can keep that here. And then you can also manually assign the device to groups just by clicking the groups that you want it to be a part of. And since we use this alert beacon for training, I'm going to put it in a bunch of groups that we use when we're sending out alerts for our trainings. And then if you click on the advanced settings here, there are some more advanced settings that you can manage for your alert beacons. This RS232 device is where if you do have an LED marquee connected to your alert beacon, like I have behind me, you can pick the scroll mode and the color that you'd like to assign to that LED sign, which is connected to the RS232 port on the alert beacon. And then each of your alert beacons are going to have two input ports and two output ports. The inputs are most often used with panic buttons, and you can see I do have a panic button connected to each of the inputs on that yellow alert beacon. So I'm going to give them a panic button configuration number. I'm going to assign aux1 panic button configuration number 1, and then the second one I'm going to give configuration number 2. And that just helps me assign a specific alert to the panic button so I can make sure it's doing what I want whenever each of those panic buttons is pressed. And then I don't have anything connected to the output ports on that alert beacon behind me, but this could be helpful if you do want to integrate door lock controls or if you have other sirens or strobes, you can connect those other devices to the output ports if you do have them. But I'm just going to leave those blank since I don't have anything there. And then the final setting on this page is a location setting. And that could be helpful, again, for record keeping if you do want to put in a precise location where the alert beacon is installed. You can put in custom latitude and longitude coordinates, or you could pick from a location that you already have added from the locations page in your system. But I think this looks good for my alert beacon settings, so I'm going to go ahead and click Add to add that alert beacon back into the system. So now I'll be able to see it showing up here, the yellow alert beacon, and I can see this is checked, so it is online and successfully connected. But I do recommend every time you are installing a new device that you send a test alert just to make sure everything is connected appropriately. So what I'm going to do is go to the custom activation page here, and I'm just going to send a test alert to this yellow alert beacon to make sure everything looks good. So I have a general message for a system test that I'm going to pull in. Maybe I'll pick this system test message here, just so if anyone happens to walk by the alert beacon, they'll know that I'm just sending a test out. And then I'm just going to set this test to run for 5 minutes at the lowest priority. And then for the alert service, I'm just going to pick this alert beacon alert service to activate my alert beacons. And this is a default alert service you should have on your system. But if you don't see the alert beacon alert service from this dropdown, you can create one under the configure system section from this alert services page. And then I can click the plus sign here to update the settings for the alert beacon. So I could set an initial duration here, maybe the first 10 seconds. I want my alert beacon on max volume to make sure that it's loud and everything sounds good. And I can pick whatever tone I'd like my alert beacon to play from these 8 tone options. And you can preview any of those tones with the speaker icon here. And then you can also pick the visual alert type that you'd like. That's just the LED pattern that your alert beacon would have. And there are several different options for that as well. And then maybe after that initial duration, when it goes into the long-term settings for the rest of the alert, since I'm just testing this, I might have it go down to silent. And then I could also pick a different visual alert type if I wanted to for the long-term settings. And then there are some peripheral settings that can be helpful. For example, because I have that LED marquee connected, I can click this checkbox here to also activate the LED marquee during the alert. And if you did have any strobes or other devices connected to the alert beacon output ports, then you can check the appropriate checkbox to include those as well. And then there is also this third one down that says use alternate LED color, green. So I'm going to check that since I'm just sending a test alert. That'll mean my alert beacon would blink green instead of red, which is good to let people know there isn't a real active threat going on. And just because I'm sitting right in front of my alert beacon, I'm actually just going to put it on low volume since even low is a little bit loud if you are right in front of it. And then the final step here is choosing the recipients for the alert. I'm just going to pick that yellow alert beacon we just added from this units option. So that's the only device that I'm going to activate. And then I'll hit continue, confirm that this looks good, and then click send. So now we can see the alert beacon going off behind me. Hopefully you can hear that. That's the low volume setting. And I can see on the LED marquee as well. So that looks good. And it's been 10 seconds. So now it's in the long-term settings where I had the alert beacon go down to silent. So I think this looks good. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that test alert. And my alert beacon has been successfully installed. And now I'm gonna move back to the slides here and we'll go into the next product today, which is the IP text-to-speech speaker. And you can see I do have one behind me here as well. And those speakers are designed to deliver synchronized, facility-wide text-to-speech alerting so that you can deliver the message in a calm, consistent way and immediately notify everyone that's in your building. And the server communicates with the text-to-speech speaker using TLS over port 8, 443, and 443 and 80, depending on the configuration that you have selected. And for the mounting guidelines for the text-to-speech speakers, we do recommend, of course, mounting them in a location that can receive power and where the volume of the speaker can be configured to meet the needs of your coverage area. And like the alert beacons, we do recommend installing the speakers in heavily trafficked areas like corridors, lobbies, places that people are going to be moving and able to hear the message. And for optimal coverage, we do recommend having multiple speakers throughout the building. Each common area or hallway should contain at least one speaker. And if you are connecting power over Ethernet, this is the preferred method, and the only required connection is the data/power cable from the PoE data equipment, and it'll use Category 5E or Category 6 cabling with a standard RJ45 or network connector. And the IP text-to-speech speaker utilizes the 802.3 AF standard with a maximum power draw of 15.4 watts. And you do also have the ability, if you'd like, to connect AC/DC power. If PoE is not an option, you can use a power adapter plugged into an AC power receptacle. For AC power, you'll use a 24-volt step-down transformer. And for DC power, you'll use the optionally included 24-volt 2A power adapter. And you can see that being used in the images here. And again, this information is all in the installation guide that we'll share at the end of the session. And then for IP text-to-speech speakers, you will connect the speaker to your network using an RJ45 or network connector. And once that's connected, it will automatically attempt to connect to your Alertus server. So it does not need to be manually added like the alert beacon was. And the firmware in the IP text-to-speech speaker is pre-programmed for your site's host name. So it will be sent by production, already set up to communicate with your Alertus server. And for testing the speaker, there is a volume knob on the back of the unit that you can move up and down to adjust the volume. And for a volume test, there is a test button on the back of the speaker that you can hold down to hear a test alert so that you can adjust the volume. And again, we do recommend recording the serial number, which is on the back of the circuit board on the back of the speaker, and the location that the speaker is installed in, just for your records so that you can keep track of everything. And just for time, I'm not going to go too much into the LEDs on the back of the speaker, but I did just want to point out that there are a number of LEDs on the board that's visible on the back of the device that will give you indicators about the connection and if everything is working correctly. And all of those LEDs and their meanings are going to be included in the installation guide that I've been mentioning, that we'll share if you did want to take a look at that LED information. But I did want to sign back into the console now so that we can send another test alert, this time for the IP text-to-speech speaker. So I can confirm that this device is added to my system if I go under that Configure System section back to the Alert Devices page. And unlike the alert beacon that needed to be manually added, the IP text-to-speech speakers will show up in this device list automatically as soon as they are connected. So I can see my speakers showing up here, but I could click Edit if I did want to update the settings. So I do recommend updating the device name similarly to the alert beacon to include some sort of indication of where the device is located. You can also add a description for the device if you'd like. This ID number will just be automatically assigned whenever the alert beacon checks in, or whenever the text-to-speech speaker checks in with the server. So you can't change that. That's just how the server will identify that specific device. And then similarly to alert beacons, you can also assign your text-to-speech speakers to groups from this page. And there is an additional text-to-speech profile selection. You can most often stick with the default profile, but this could be used if you did want to set some more advanced text-to-speech settings. And then back on the advanced settings, again, there are some additional settings here. For example, you could assign the speaker to a location, and then there are also RS-232 ports and input ports on the speaker as well. If you did, for example, want to connect a panic button, then you would set that up here. But in order to activate the text-to-speech speaker during an activation, we will use an alert service for an IP text-to-speech speaker. And if you don't have one created yet, then you can add a new alert service from this page, and you can also edit existing ones. And for now, I'm just going to use the default text-to-speech alert service that I have already set up, just this TTS default service. But if I click in to update the settings, this is where you can determine what audio is going to be played during the activation. So right now I have it set to text to speech, just to tell my speaker to read my alert message out loud whenever I send it. But you could also just play a specific audio file if you'd like as well. And then you do also have the option to set a pre-wave and post-wave audio file. If you did want to play like a beep or chime before or after the alert is read, that could be a good way to really get people's attention. So I do have this chime playing before and after my alert message is read out loud. And this is also where you can specify the number of times that the audio will repeat, and you can also specify the total audio play count. And to better understand what these settings mean, there is a graphic up here. Basically, the alert audio play count here is how many times the alert itself will be repeated back to back. And then the audio play count is going to include the pre-wave and the post-wave files. So I have it set up to play the chime, then read my alert message 3 times, and then play the chime again, and all of that would just repeat once. But I could update that if I wanted to. And then you can also control the speech rate here. If you notice your speaker is talking too fast or too slow, you can adjust that here. I think I have it set on fast. And then I'll go ahead and just save that. So now that I've determined the settings that I want in that alert service, I'm going to go ahead and activate my speaker again, just by going back to the custom activation page. And I'm going to send the same system test message. I can set the duration and priority again to be whatever I'd like. I'll just stick with 5 minutes at the lowest priority for the test. And this time I'm going to pull in that default text-to-speech alert service that we were looking at. And you can click the plus sign on this page if you did want to view or update any of the speaker settings for this particular alert. But I just have text-to-speech selected, so it's going to read this message out loud. And then the last step here, choosing recipients. And again, I'm just going to send it to that one text-to-speech speaker on the wall behind me. So I'll be able to hit continue. I can confirm again that it's online and then click send. So that will go ahead and send the alert out. So we should hear the speaker going off momentarily. As soon as it checks in, there we go. And I heard that chime, and hopefully you can hear it, but now it's reading that test message, and it'll repeat that 3 times and then play the chime again.
This is a test of the Alertus emergency notification
But
system.
I think that sounds good. I could let it run, but I'm just gonna cancel it early.
Contain important alert information. This is a test of the Alertus emergency notification system.
Just waiting for it to check in and stop talking. There we go. But awesome. I think that was everything that I wanted to cover today in regards to those 2 devices. I think Brooke is gonna take over to share those resources that I mentioned in the chat. And we do still have a few minutes left today, so please feel free to put in any questions that you have as well.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah. As you mentioned, I'm currently putting in the installation guide for the alert beacon in the chat. And I am now going to put in the installation guide for the IP text-to-speech speakers. The QA box is open, and as I mentioned, we have our implementation experts here. If you have any very technical questions, do let us know, and we are here to help with that. If, however, Sarah covered all the things that you had questions on, we will put in the chat next week's power lunch as well. So next week we're going to do part 1 of the 3 levels of testing, and we're going to go into test mode and silent test. The audible test will be in part 2, which will be the following week. But if you are interested in attending that session, then please register there. We'll be on the call for another minute or so, but if that is everything that you need, then we appreciate your time today, and we'll see you hopefully soon.
Have a good weekend.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions come in, and it is 12 o'clock. So we are going to sign off for the day, but thank you all again, and we'll talk hopefully next week. Bye.